They laughed at the quiet maid, mocked her accent, and treated her like dirt. But one night, she walked in wearing a U.S. Marshal badge. They laughed at the quiet maid, mocked her accent, and treated her like dirt. But one night, I walked in wearing a U.S. Marshal badge. My name is Maria Delgado. I wasn't born in this country. I came here with calloused hands, a broken heart, and a dream bigger than the suitcase I carried across the border. Life didn't give me a silver spoon. It handed me a mop. Back home in Honduras, my father was a policeman. He used to wear a clean uniform and had a proud smile every morning. I wanted to be like him, strong, fair, and brave. But when he was killed by a cartel during a raid, everything in my world collapsed. My mother begged me to flee. She sold her wedding ring so I could afford a fake passport and a one-way ticket to America. I was 22 when I arrived in Texas. I didn't speak English well. I was scared, alone, and too proud to cry. I found shelter with a distant cousin in Houston who let me sleep on her couch. She worked cleaning offices and told me, "People like us don't rise, we survive." That hit me hard. But I believed differently. The first job I found was as a hotel maid in a wealthy, upscale neighborhood. It was a towering glass building where the floors smelled of lemon wax and money. The place was crawling with important people, politicians, businessmen, celebrities. And then there was me in my gray uniform, pushing a squeaky cart, eyes down, mouth shut. They used to call me Mouse because I barely spoke. But it wasn't because I didn't have anything to say. It was because I was always listening. The guests were mostly rude, but it wasn't them that hurt me the most. It was the staff. There was Tiffany, the manager's daughter who acted like she owned the world. She mocked my accent every chance she got. Mira, she'd say, laughing, twisting my name into something ugly. Her little group of friends, front desk girls, bellboys, even some security guards, joined in. They laughed behind my back, sometimes to my face. Once, when I tripped while mopping, they clapped and called me Lucia the clumsy maid. They spread rumors that I was undocumented and said I smelled like beans and bleach. I worked harder than any of them, but they still treated me like I was invisible, or worse, like garbage. But I never yelled, never cried in front of them. Because while they mocked me, I was watching. I was remembering. And deep down, I was building something they couldn't see, a future. I cleaned rooms during the day and studied at night. I took ESL classes at the community center. I watched courtroom shows to learn English. I read police manuals online. I still remembered my father's old lessons, how to walk into a room, how to spot a lie, how to protect and serve without fear. I hid it all. Nobody at the hotel knew that I had enrolled in online courses. Nobody knew I was taking criminal justice classes while saving every tip I got in a hidden jar behind my fridge. I studied law while scrubbing toilets. I memorized codes while ironing sheets. The day I passed the citizenship test, I cried alone in the bathroom of the hotel. My hands smelled of ammonia, but I clutched that tiny certificate like it was gold. Still, they didn't stop mocking me. One day, Tiffany spilled wine in the lobby and blamed me for it. I got suspended for a week without pay. When I came back, someone had written, "Go back to your jungle," on my locker in permanent marker. I took a photo. I didn't report it. Not because I was scared, but because I had a plan. I applied to a local police department the day I got my green card. They rejected me. Twice. But I didn't stop. I applied again. And again. They finally let me in for training. Most people laughed when they saw my file. Some instructors underestimated me. One even said, "She won't last a week." But I did. And I was better than they thought. I was quiet, but deadly accurate with a pistol. I was polite, but I could break a man's hold in under 5 seconds. I was calm, but my fire burned deep. 3 years later, I passed federal background checks. And when the day came to raise my hand and take the U.S. Marshal oath, I remembered Tiffany's smirk, her fake accent, her laughter. I wore the badge under my suit that day. I was no longer a maid. I was Deputy U.S. Marshal Maria Delgado. And I was about to return, where it all began. 3 years had passed. 3 years of early mornings, late nights, criminal investigations, arrests, and federal raids. I was no longer the invisible maid scrubbing hotel floors. I was now leading operations to track fugitives, serving warrants, and escorting high-risk prisoners. My badge wasn't just a piece of metal, it was proof. Proof that I had risen from the dirt they kicked in my face. But in my mind, that hotel still echoed with laughter that wasn't mine. My memory was a vault, and I never forgot. Never forgave. Then came the call that changed everything. A tip came in from the Houston field office. A high-profile arms trafficker had been spotted checking into a luxury hotel downtown under a fake name. The place matched the description, and when the address appeared on the screen, my heart stopped. It was the hotel. The hotel. The same lobby where I had once stood in silence as they humiliated me. The same walls that had heard my name twisted and tossed like trash. Now, I wasn't going back with a mop. I was going back with a warrant. I was chosen as the lead marshal for the operation. The team didn't know the full story, only that I seemed unusually quiet that day. Focused. Almost too focused. I didn't wear tactical gear that night. I wore a black suit, polished boots, my badge around my neck, and my U.S. Marshal ID clipped to my belt. It was a rainy Thursday. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement as I stepped out of the black SUV. Thunder cracked in the distance. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from years of buried rage finally reaching the surface. I walked through the revolving doors and into my past. The hotel hadn't changed. Same chandeliers. Same marble floors. Same faint smell of expensive candles masking cleaning chemicals. And behind the front desk was Tiffany. She was older, a little heavier, still trying to look glamorous in her cheap makeup and flashy heels. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? She never looked me in the eye when I was a maid. "Can I help?" "Why?" she started. Then she paused. Her eyes squinted. "Maria?" I didn't smile. I didn't blink. "Yes," I said calmly. "Maria Delgado, Deputy U.S. Marshal." She actually laughed. "Oh my God, stop. Wait, seriously? Is this like a costume party or something?" I pulled out my badge. The gold glimmered under the chandelier light. Her laugh died in her throat. "I'm here on official business," I said. "Federal warrant. I need access to room 1703. Immediately." She stared, stunned. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I could see her memory struggling to reconcile the silent maid she used to humiliate with the federal agent now commanding the room. "But you were just a maid." "Wrong move." I stepped forward. "I was never just anything. But you were always just mean." Tiffany stammered something and tried to call her manager, who turned out to be her fiancé now. Go figure. He came stomping out of the back office, annoyed and arrogant. "Ma'am, I don't care who you think you are. You can't just barge in." That's when two other marshals stepped in behind me. One held up the signed warrant. The other was already checking his sidearm. "Sir, if you obstruct a federal operation," my partner warned, "you'll be arrested. Do you understand?" The manager went pale. They handed over the keys. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I simply turned and walked to the elevator, leaving Tiffany frozen behind the desk like a wax figure. But as the doors were closing, I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't laughing anymore. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I didn't come for revenge. I came for justice. But revenge showed up anyway. The elevator ride to the 17th floor was silent. I stood between two fellow marshals, both unaware that I had once cleaned these carpets on my knees. My heart beat steady. My breathing was calm. Years of training had prepared me for this, but no amount of training could have prepared me for how personal this moment would feel. We reached the hallway. Plush. Quiet. The same faint scent of citrus cleaner and wealthy indifference. I approached room 1703, the penthouse suite. Inside, the man we were after, Alejandro Vega, was a known trafficker. Ties to foreign weapons networks. Dangerous, armed, and arrogant. The kind of man who treated women like currency and laws like suggestions. The door was locked. One of my agents nodded. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I gave the command. Breach it. The battering ram struck hard. The door cracked open. We stormed in with precision. U.S. Marshals. Hands where I can see them. Vega was mid-drink at the minibar. He spun around, eyes wide, instinctively reaching for his waistband, but I was faster. Bang. Not a bullet. A beanbag round. Straight to the chest. He crumbled, coughing, gasping. We pinned him down, cuffed him, and began reading his rights. His confusion turned into rage when he saw me. You? He spat in Spanish. A maid? I leaned close. No. A marshal. Back in the lobby, the cuffs still on Vega's wrists, a crowd had formed. Hotel guests whispered. Staff peeked from behind potted plants and linen carts. Tiffany was standing near the front desk, clutching her phone, wide-eyed. I walked straight to her. She took a step back. I didn't know. We didn't mean. Stop, I said calmly. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every laugh. Every insult. Every time you looked past me like I didn't matter. I was young, she whispered. So was I replied. And I carried your words like scars. She lowered her eyes. I stepped closer and quietly added, you don't know how strong someone is until you give them a reason to rise. And with that, I walked out, leaving her in silence, surrounded by everything she thought made her powerful. 2 weeks after the bust, I received a letter in my mailbox. It was handwritten. The penmanship was shaky, unfamiliar. It was from Maria Sanchez, the hotel's elderly laundry worker. She was the only one who had ever been kind to me all those years ago. She had once shared her sandwich with me when I skipped lunch to make ends meet. Her letter said, I saw you on the news. When I heard your name, I cried. You made it out. You did it. We all watched. Even the cruel ones. We all saw you shine. Thank you, Maria, for making us believe we can become more. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the letter trembling in my hands, tears finally falling. Not because I was sad, but because the girl who used to cry alone in hotel supply closets had finally found her voice, and the world had no choice now but to hear it. Months passed. Life went on. More missions. More arrests. I became a name whispered with respect inside the Marshal service. But one afternoon, a special call came. The Department of Justice wanted me to give a speech. A keynote at a leadership summit in D.C. about resilience and rising above prejudice. I flew there in full uniform. Clean, polished, confident. And when I stepped onto the stage, I saw rows of faces, some admiring, some curious, some teary-eyed. But in the front row was Tiffany. I froze for a split second. She was thinner now. Tired. No makeup. Her hands nervously gripped her handbag. She didn't look smug. She looked ashamed. After the speech, she came to me. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I looked at her. This was the moment I had imagined for years. But now that it was real, I didn't want vengeance. I wanted peace. I forgive you, I said quietly. But don't expect me to forget. Use what you did as your lesson, and never do it again. Not to anyone. She nodded, holding back tears. And I walked away. Because I didn't need her apology to be whole. I already was. After the summit in D.C., something shifted in me. Until then, I had been climbing silently, keeping my head down, working twice as hard to earn half the recognition. But that speech, standing tall in front of senators, sheriffs, and survivors, showed me something. My story wasn't just about revenge. It was about representation. For every girl cleaning offices at night, for every immigrant mocked for their accent, for every soul who dared to dream beyond what the world expected of them. I began visiting schools, especially in poor neighborhoods. I spoke in churches, in community centers, in places that smelled like struggle and survival. I told them, you don't have to change who you are to become more. You just have to endure. Let their cruelty fuel your courage. I saw little girls in worn shoes with big eyes and bigger dreams. I saw boys with scars in their hearts from parents who disappeared or died too young. And I saw myself in all of them. One rainy evening, I was sent back to Houston on a routine case. A hotel guest had gone missing, and the last place he was seen was once again that hotel. It had been renovated. New tiles, new staff, a new name. But the ghosts, they remained. I walked in and noticed a familiar figure folding towels near the laundry room, an older woman with hunched shoulders and silver hair. Maria Sanchez. She turned, squinted, and gasped. Mija, is it really you? I hugged her tightly. Still working? I asked, smiling softly. Still breathing, she laughed. But now, people listen when I talk. Ever since they saw you on TV, the young girls don't feel small anymore. That meant more than any medal. I handed her something. A small velvet box. Inside was my old cleaning badge, the one I wore on my first day at the hotel. She looked confused. It's not trash, I told her. It's a reminder of where I started and who helped me get there. She cried in my arms. They say revenge is best served cold. But mine wasn't cold at all. It burned. It burned through every sleepless night I spent memorizing legal codes. It burned in my legs after double shifts. It burned in my heart when they called me worthless. It burned in silence when I was treated like I didn't exist. But now, that fire kept others warm. Injustice was the flame I carried forward. Years passed. I became the first immigrant woman in my district to lead a high-level U.S. Marshal task force. One day, we were assigned a multi-agency sting involving a fake employment agency that was trafficking vulnerable housemates from Central America. My hands shook as I read the victim list. They looked like me, sounded like me, were me. 15 years ago, we raided the site. We freed them. We offered them legal aid, therapy, shelter. Some cried. Some trembled. But one, a little girl named Clara, looked straight into my eyes and whispered in Spanish. They said no one would come for us. But you came. And I knew then. My revenge had come full circle. Not in punishment, but in protection. Years later, when I finally retired from the service, I didn't throw a party. I didn't make a speech. I returned to Honduras. Not to live, but to build. With help from sponsors, I opened a bilingual academy for girls. We named it Escuela de Fuego, the School of Fire. Every student got a notebook with my story printed inside the front cover. Not because I wanted them to remember me, but because I wanted them to remember what's possible. So, yes, they laughed at the quiet maid, mocked her accent, treated her like dirt. But one night, she walked in wearing a U.S. Marshal badge. And for the first time, the world stood still and listened. When I was accepted into the U.S. Marshal Service Training Academy in Georgia, I arrived with only 2 suitcases and a heart full of doubt. I was the oldest in the cohort. The only one with an accent. The only one who used to clean hotel toilets to survive. They didn't laugh openly, not like the hotel staff had, but their looks told the same story. During physical training, my legs ached from years of undernourishment. I failed my first obstacle course by 3 minutes. During firearms drills, my hands trembled from anxiety. My first shot didn't even hit the silhouette. But I stayed late. I rose early. I rewrote notes until they were burned into my memory. And every night, I whispered one sentence in the mirror. You're not going back. Failure was not an option. Because going back meant being invisible again. During month 3 of training, I broke down. It wasn't during combat drills or classroom tests. It was during lunch. A group of recruits from Texas had circled around a table laughing at bad accents and mates who think they can shoot. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. I stood, tray in my hands, heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to slam the tray down, to quit, walk out and prove them right. But instead, I did something worse. I sat alone and cried silently into my soup. A female instructor passed by, a retired marshal named Reynolds. She saw the tears, the stiff posture, the clenched fists. She didn't say anything. Not then. But later that night, she found me in the gym, still training. She tossed me a towel and said, I came from a trailer park with 3 brothers, no daddy, and a mother who worked the graveyard shift. They said I couldn't make it either. But I didn't fight to prove them wrong. I fought to prove myself right. You've already proven more than they'll ever understand. Don't give up now. And I didn't. My first field assignment came just 4 months after graduation. It was simple. Serve a federal warrant on a suspected identity thief living in a trailer park outside Baton Rouge. He was known to run, known to get violent. I wasn't leading the operation. I was just backup. But things went wrong. The suspect bolted. My senior agent tripped. Backup was delayed. I chased him. Alone. Through trash-strewn lots, over fences, into a dried-out creek bed. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. He turned with a knife. I pulled my weapon. My voice didn't tremble. Drop it. I will shoot. He paused. Then lunged. I fired. One shot. Not fatal. A thigh hit. He dropped, screaming. I cuffed him with shaking hands. But I never let him see fear in my eyes. When my team arrived, they said nothing. But that night, my supervising agent handed me a folded paper. Inside was a single line. We don't judge by the accent. We judge by the badge. You wore it well today. Not every case gave me closure. There was a little boy, Marco, taken from his undocumented mother by a fraudulent immigration officer who sold children. We caught him. But Marco had already been smuggled out of state. I spent months helping the FBI track him. We found him. Barely alive. Barely speaking. He looked at me through the glass and whispered in Spanish. Are you really real? I nodded. Say mi amor. We're real now. He smiled once, then fell asleep. That night, I wept. Because sometimes, justice comes too late. Years later, one final surprise came full circle. The hotel where it all began. It filed for bankruptcy, mismanagement, lawsuits, staff mistreatment complaints. The building was being sold. I was invited, unofficially, to walk through one last time. Not as an agent, as a guest. I wore a white blouse, slacks, my Marshal badge tucked away, hidden. As I walked the halls, I remembered every spilled bucket, every cruel whisper, every footstep that echoed in shame. Then I walked past the mirror in the lobby. And this time, I saw myself clearly. Not the maid they mocked. Not the immigrant they ignored. Not the ghost they trampled. But a woman forged in silence and fire. Now standing on ground she once mopped with tears. It was a regular Thursday afternoon when the letter arrived. An official U.S. Department of Justice envelope. Thick, heavy. I opened it, expecting another case file or reassignment notice. But instead, I found a crisp letter on embossed paper. Marshal Delgado, you have been nominated for the Congressional Medal of Valor for your outstanding service, particularly in anti-trafficking enforcement. A committee would like to meet with you in Washington. I froze. Me? A maid's daughter? The girl who used to eat lunch in janitor closets to avoid stares. But then, I remembered Marco. The girl named Clara. The women I'd helped rescue. Maybe this wasn't for me. Maybe this was for them. Just days before my flight to DC, something shook me to the core. An internal affairs officer visited my office. He placed a sealed document on my desk. Someone filed an anonymous complaint, he said, alleging you falsified parts of your service record. My chest tightened. I knew exactly who it was. Agent Paul Winslow. We had once trained together. He came from privilege, trust fund, perfect English, Ivy League law school. And he hated that I rose faster than him. Hated that someone with an accent and no pedigree had outshined him. He had once told me, "You're lucky the system pities people like you." I never reported it. I thought I didn't need to. Now, it was biting back. They scheduled an ethics review panel. I had to fly to DC early, not for the award, but to defend my name. The room was cold, quiet. 3 senior officials. 1 legal rep. No audience. No allies. They asked hard questions. Why did you omit your employment gap after immigrating? Why did you delay reporting Agent Winslow's harassment? Were you truly authorized for the Baton Rouge arrest years ago? I answered each with composure, but my voice trembled at times. Not from guilt, but from exhaustion. Years of carrying the burden of being perfect. Untouchable. Impeccable. Because one mistake, and it all falls. Then one panelist, a black woman in uniform, leaned forward and asked, "Did anyone in this room ever walk 15 blocks to their second cleaning job while studying criminal codes at night?" No one answered. She turned to me. "You belong here. Don't let small men in big suits convince you otherwise." After I was cleared of all allegations, I requested to speak at a town hall meeting on recruitment diversity. It wasn't required, but I needed to. I stood on stage, dressed in full uniform, before hundreds of federal officials and said, "I used to clean the floors you walk on. I speak with an accent that carries oceans and stories." I was laughed at, passed over, insulted. But I never lowered my eyes. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to make the path smoother for the one who comes after me. And when I stepped down, the applause wasn't loud. It was long, respectful, reverent, because I hadn't just survived. I had transformed. Before the medal ceremony, I returned to my old apartment building in Houston. Unit 3B, the place I had once shared with 3 other immigrant women. One of them, Camilla, still lived there. She opened the door with a gasp. "Mama de Dios. Maria? Is that you?" I hugged her, held her like time hadn't passed. She showed me photos of her kids, told me about her bakery job. I left her an envelope. Inside? A prepaid rent check for a year. A small gift from the girl who once borrowed her shoes for job interviews. The day came. I stood in front of a sea of uniforms and suits, from judges to generals, agents to activists. The president handed me the medal with a quiet smile. "You made the badge mean something again." I stood at the podium, looked into the cameras, and said only this: "This medal does not erase the mockery, the doubt, or the tears. But it shines brighter because of them. For every quiet woman who walks unseen, your silence is not weakness. It's gathering strength." 6 months later, I received a letter from a university in Austin. They wanted me to serve as visiting faculty for a new course on law enforcement ethics and human dignity. I accepted. In my first class, a student raised her hand. She was soft-spoken, nervous. Her accent reminded me of mine. "Ma'am," she asked, "do you ever regret how you started?" I smiled. No, because they saw a maid. But I was always more. I just had to show them. 2 years later, I came out of retirement for one case only. A hotel manager in Texas had been accused of labor abuse against undocumented workers. Sounded familiar. When I arrived, the accused turned out to be Tiffany's husband. She was there, older now, bitter. I introduced myself. Her face turned white. Still carrying that badge? She sneered. I looked her in the eye and said, No. Now I carry justice. She had no words. One morning, I found a letter taped to my office door. No name. Just childlike handwriting. I'm 10. My mom is a maid. People laugh at her. But she showed me a video of you. And now I believe maids can be heroes too. Thank you. Claire. I sat down at my desk, cried softly, and whispered. That's why. I never asked for revenge. I never wanted to ruin them. I wanted to rise, so far beyond their reach that their laughter couldn't follow me anymore. I wore their mockery like armor. Their cruelty became my map. And now, I look back with no bitterness. Because every door they slammed, every insult they threw, every laugh they choked out behind my back, was another spark that built the fire that made me unstoppable. So, yes, they laughed at the quiet maid, mocked her accent, treated her like dirt. But one night, she walked in wearing a U.S. Marshal badge and left a legacy no one could erase.